God is good. Why is there evil? Boy, what a profound question, and one that should not be taken lightly and that has been wrestled with for many, many years. But I'm going to dive in on it from a little bit different angle. I'm going to attack it from not only philosophical and intellectual, but from a spiritual standpoint, and see if we can unpack and unravel that question. So hang with me all the way through, and we're going to see if we can dive in this together. First statement: if a loving God exists and he were all powerful, then he would put an end to evil. Since evil exists, then an all loving and all powerful God does not exist. Now that's something a lot of people might proclaim and claim, and yet is that really true? I don't think it is. Now let me show you why. And so stay with me all the way through and hang with me. C.S. Lewis said, if a thing is free to be good, it is also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give them, Adam and Eve, free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. End quote. True love requires genuine free will. However, when people sin, it affects other people. There is a consequence to that. If God desires a true relationship with all people, he must give all people this freedom to love him or reject him. And henceforth, sin can get in the way of that. If God created us as robots and we loved him without making a decision or on our own, then it wouldn't be love, would it? Dr. Frank Turek had said, in order to know what is not right, it's imperative to know what is right. In order for there to be evil, there has to be good. And there would be no such thing as evil if there was no such thing as good. There would be no such thing as good unless God existed. End quote. Sean McDowell put it this way: if we are saying something is unjust, then we would have to first know that there had to be something just. Evil is a corruption of good. If a tooth had decay, you would have to know what the tooth was like without decay in order to know that it decayed. You can't have lies without truth. Can God make humans have free will and then force us and determine us to always do right? If God is going to allow us to love, then he can allow us not to love. End quote. C.S. Lewis said, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. End quote. In the book Unfinished, Filling the Hole in Our Gospel, Richard Stern writes, nothing challenges our faith or fuels our doubts more than the presence of pain, suffering, and evil in our world. On January 12, 2010, the world was confronted with human suffering on a massive scale after an earthquake in Haiti killed more than 200,000 and left more than 1 million homeless. Why, God, he writes, the sudden deaths of so many innocent people and the staggering human suffering that persists seem to mock the very notion of a loving God. Just where was God in Haiti? And he goes on to say, we, not God, are trapped in time. We, not God, only see only in part and cannot see the whole. We, not God, must wait for that day when he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Revelation 21:14. We live in the not yet, but God sees the already. Unlike God, we live in the time between the already and not yet, and we must wait until then. Until then, we are commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. Until then, we are called to comfort the afflicted, give food to the hungry, and water to the thirsty. Until then, we are to shelter the homeless, clothe the naked, and grieve with the grieving. Until then, we are Christ's heart and hands and feet, the ambassadors of his love in a hurting world. End quote. As Kyle Butt shared in a debate with Bart Ehrman, he said, without a God, we do not have to wrestle with many things that seem unjust or unfair. Without a God, we do not have to demand that other people adhere to absolute moral values. Without a God, there is no problem of suffering because humans are just another living organism that happen to get in the way of the naturalistic workings of the universe. End quote. Francis S. Collins, MD, PhD, was a world-famous geneticist and a staunch atheist. He described himself as an obnoxious atheist. He said no law of science could adequately explain the existence of morality. He read C.S. Lewis' Mere Christianity, where he says, within the first 3 pages, I realized that my arguments against faith were those of a schoolboy, end quote. And he later became a Christian. Maybe because God is good, he allows us to go through suffering because it's a reminder that we are not in control and we are to look towards something bigger and better. For those who have put their trust in Jesus, I have one thing to say: we are not home yet.